The name to remember is Scooby-Doo! Scooby-Doo!
The Star Wars Holiday Special is a production that was so infamously bad that even those who never saw any of the Star Wars films or TV shows or any other holiday special instinctively know that it was one of the worst things ever produced for television. It was clearly the product of a coked-out executive determined to mine something out of the Star Wars phenomenon of the late 1970s when audiences were craving more adventures of Luke, Han, and Leia. Unfortunately, instead of focusing on the Rebel Alliance's big three, it was decided to hire Bruce Vilanch to write terrible jokes for B. Arthur and Harvey Korman. Thus, kids in 1978, desperate to see spaceships blowing each other out of the sky, were instead treated to Chewbacca's family watching holographic acrobats in the galaxy far, far away equivalent of softcore pornography. After being fired, that executive somehow managed to drunkenly stumble across town to the rundown section of Los Angeles with all the animation studios who weren't Disney and bribed someone there with hookers and whatever blow he still hadn't snorted himself to let him produce Scooby Goes Hollywood a year later. Where the Star Wars Holiday Special contained a nonsensical story, bad animation, has-been actors, lousy songs that come out of nowhere, and established characters forced into little more than cameo appearances, Scooby Goes Hollywood decided to shake things up by featuring a nonsensical story, bad animation, has-been actors, lousy songs that come out of nowhere, and established characters forced into little more than cameo appearances. One of the best things about the original Scooby-Doo Where Are You is how the show is timeless and still holds up well today.
Welcome to Shags and Scooby's Haunted Chinese Restaurant, the place where the ghosts eat the most. Here the specialty of the house, chocolate chop suey and spare ribber a la mode. If you want anything else, just go
with a few really bad exceptions. Scooby Goes Hollywood, however, is dated in a way that would make Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer cringe. It's essentially a variety show, a format as old-fashioned and unhip as all of the 1970s references contained within. To be fair, it was common for shows of that nature to work in catchphrases and allusions to current top TV shows and movies, but Scooby Goes Hollywood does that with the added Hanna-Barbera propensity for milking trends when they were already near the end of their popularity, or even years past being in the public eye. The film begins with what seems to be the middle of a typical Scooby-Doo episode, with the boys escaping a pursuing monster through dangerously over-the-top means before the big reveal that this was all taking place on a Hollywood soundstage with a film crew recording the action. This must have blown the minds of little kids watching at the time to learn that in the Scooby-Doo universe, the Scooby Gang were just actors putting on a Saturday morning cartoon show. Tired of being typecast, Shaggy pressures Scooby to leave the show and pursue other roles. They visit the studio head with a series of pilots for new television series to showcase Scooby's potential as a dramatic actor. This was against the wishes of the rest of the Scooby Gang, and for the most part, even Scooby wasn't that interested in changing his career. Shaggy, on the other hand, keeps pushing Scooby like a stage mom, forcing their miserable children into a never-ending series of auditions. Lucky for Scooby, all this was happening when Miramax was still in New York. Of course, every pilot they show eventually devolves into typical Scooby shenanigans, which begs the question, if the whole point was to turn Scooby into a serious actor, why in the hell didn't they redo the scenes until Scooby got it right? We're not talking the need for Kubrickian amounts of retakes, but would it kill Shaggy to slow down enough to film a scene of Scooby taking on a bad guy without ending up being tossed into a horse trough? These pilots, of course, are really nothing more than parodies of then-popular film and television series, which was a common tactic of variety shows at the time. These include send-ups of How the West Was Won, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Superman the Movie, The Sound of Music, The Love Boat, and even Sonny and Cher, itself a variety show. Speaking of Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, Hanna-Barbera would go on to produce their own animated versions of those shows a year or two later, featuring most of the original cast of the live-action shows. Here in Scooby Goes Hollywood, however, all the characters were voiced by pretty bad impersonators. The studio executive desperately tries to return Scooby to his own series by recasting his part, which is actually a common tactic employed by studios whenever there's a contract dispute with one of their actors. This ploy backfires, however, because it only convinces Shaggy that the studio really is interested in Scooby taking on more serious roles. It's not until Fred, Velma, and Daphne, and children all over the country make a heartfelt appeal that Scooby decides to return to Saturday morning for the sake of his fans. But I also can't help but think that those three had ulterior motives, like keeping their jobs. Fred really didn't want to go back to Chippendales. The story ends with Scooby rejoining the rest of the gang, but not before Shaggy tries pitching his own ideas for knockoff series featuring himself to the studio executive, which pretty much explains his motivation for the entire show. Scooby Goes Hollywood raises a lot of questions, with one of the biggest being, who exactly was this for? This television special is considered by many to be the first Scooby-Doo film, in the sense that it was a one-shot production that was not part of any series itself. It even aired during prime time. For those too young to remember, before cable TV and streaming services, there were only 3 major television networks in the United States. Primetime referred to the period between 7 and 10 p.m. when networks could expect the most viewers and could charge the most for commercials. So in theory, anything shown during primetime should have been the best the network could offer. This was also considered the time for more mature programming, as it was assumed most school-age children would be in bed or getting ready for it, but this didn't apply to Fridays or holidays, of course. Scooby Goes Hollywood aired on a Sunday evening just before Christmas, when most American school kids would likely be on winter break. So while it did air during a time when most children would be available to watch it, many of the shows parodied weren't exactly geared towards children. Sure, Happy Days had a lot of appeal to younger kids, and The Fonz was beloved by most of them at the time, but it really wasn't a kid's show. Indeed, The Love Boat was for boring grown-ups, and a lot of the humor of Sonny and Cher was based on the marital relationship of the hosts. Not to mention, Sonny and Cher was canceled 2 years before Scooby Goes Hollywood even aired.
Scooby's Angels?
I think we found the crook's hideout.
You always were the smart one of the group.
But how do we round them up without Scooby?
And while this sounds terrible to say out loud, Charlie's Angels was popular for exactly 3 reasons. Or rather, 6 reasons. Which brings up another point. Scooby Goes Hollywood had a few scenes that felt strangely sexualized for a Scooby production. To an adult, Lavon in her tight t-shirt and short shorts feels strangely inappropriate for the target audience. And come on, who bows like that with your ass that high up?
I'm a pro.
Oh, I know you're a pro, but this is my first time.
Oh, come on! The animation itself is also terrible. The Scooby-Doo franchise, and indeed Hanna-Barbera in general, has never been known for having the best artists, with at least one very notable exception. But at least Where Are You was mostly consistent. Here, however, the character models are all over the map. I've always hated Glenn Kennedy's work, which is why for me, a pup named Scooby-Doo is pretty much the bottom of the barrel for the Scooby TV series. But man, whoever drew Scooby Goes Hollywood makes Kennedy cartoons look like Studio Ghibli. But possibly the lowest point in Scooby Goes Hollywood is when the producers turn a section of the special into a cheap clip show, spending 2 minutes showing snippets from Where Are You? Although at least it reminded viewers of what competent animation looks like. Scooby Goes Hollywood does have a few high points, and I mean high in the sense that an ant standing on its hind legs is still slightly taller than those around it. This is likely the first time they delve into Scooby-Doo's origin story with the gang by showing them picking him up at the pet shop, apparently right before Jughead arrived to snag Hot Dog. We also see other talking dogs who weren't directly related to Scooby, meaning that the Doo family aren't just a one-off mutation making a mockery of the laws of science and the natural order.
You dirty monster. You scared my brother. And you scared my sister. But you're not gonna scare me. Yeah.
How many kids in the 1970s would know who James Cagney was?
Oh, goodness gracious. It's a big creepy. Go away, you ugly thing. You give me prickly heat. Bow wow. Oh, Scooby-Doo, how to do?
We also have the first gay dog on network television.
So, you're not afraid of me, eh, Sheriff Scooby?
I don't think that was exactly what he said, Mr. Rotten. It was more like Rhyme Rotten Raider-Rim.
This is possibly also the first time that Scooby's speech impediment is directly addressed by anyone in the franchise. As mentioned earlier, Scooby Goes Hollywood features some really bad songs, but at least now I know where some of the ones on this CD came from. Having said that, this particular musical number was almost the highlight of Scooby Goes Hollywood, with the singer really putting her all into the vocals and the animation feeling more out of a Ralph Bakshi film than a cheap Hanna-Barbera cash grab. But then again, I've always liked disco, so your results may vary. And of course, the biggest high point is the return of most of the original Scooby-Doo cast, with Don Messick as Scooby, Casey Kasem as Shaggy, Frank Welker as Fred, Pat Stevens as Velma, and Heather North as Daphne. Other voices include Rip Taylor as a studio executive, Michael Bell as the Outlaw, Marilyn Schruffler as Sherry, and Joan Gerber as Levon. That's an awful lot of tombstones. In the end, Scooby Goes Hollywood is a cheap, poorly produced footnote to the Scooby franchise, and it didn't do any favors for the characters. In fact, where most Scooby-Doo episodes and direct-to-video films feature a villain who gets unmasked at the end, in this TV special, Shaggy is the actual villain, selfishly pushing Scooby in a direction the good-hearted canine doesn't want to go. And it also marks a sharp decline in the quality of the Scooby franchise as a whole. I tend to separate Scooby-Doo into 4 distinct eras. If we were to use the same naming convention as comic books, they would be referred to as the Scooby Golden, Silver, Bronze, and Modern Ages. The Scooby Golden Age would include the first 3 series, Where Are You?, the new Scooby-Doo movies, and the Scooby-Doo Show. While each series suffered a gradual decline compared to what came before, they still kept to the Scooby formula with mostly acceptable animation. I don't really consider Laugh Olympics a Scooby series, as it was really just an ensemble show of Hanna-Barbera cartoon properties. That'd be like calling Super Smash Bros. A Mario game. The Scooby Silver Age began with Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, which premiered just a few months before Scooby Goes Hollywood, meaning both were likely in production simultaneously. This era included 3 additional series, with He Who Must Not Be Named, including 13 Ghosts, as well as the 3 Red Shirt Shaggy TV films, Boo Brothers, Ghoul School, and Reluctant Werewolf. The Scooby Silver Age ended with a pup named Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo in Arabian Nights doesn't really count as a Scooby film for the same reason mentioned for Laugh Olympics. It's less a Scooby film than a mishmash of various Hanna-Barbera characters. The Scooby Bronze Age is short, but significant. Short because it only contains 4 direct-to-video films released over 3 years: Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost, Alien Invaders, and Cyber Chase, and significant because these films completely revitalized the Scooby-Doo franchise. While the more adult tone of the first 2 films was quickly dropped, the popularity and success of the releases led to a surge in production, and ever since then, there hasn't been a single year that didn't have either a Scooby television series airing, or at least one direct-to-video release. The Scooby Modern Age is where we are now, beginning with What's New Scooby-Doo, a series that managed to effectively recreate the original feeling of Where Are You, while still maintaining a contemporary yet timeless tone. Other series followed, with lows like Get a Clue and Guess Who, and the absolute height of all Scooby media, Mystery Incorporated. Not to mention the James Gunn penned big-budget live-action films of the early 2000s, which arguably led to casting the best Shaggy voice actor since 1969. In a way, I suppose Scooby fans owe a small bit of gratitude to Scooby Goes Hollywood for at least proving that standalone Scooby productions would have an audience. But wow, it's still awful. Even my wife, who manages to find the Twilight films enjoyable, had nothing good to say about Scooby Goes Hollywood. Only curious Scooby fans should consider watching this, and even then it's an exercise in endurance to slog through it. It's not available anywhere to officially stream without paying an additional subscription fee, and I only bought it because I never dreamed it would be as bad as The Last Airbender. It's not as bad as Last Airbender, but it's close.
You think that did the trick?
Yeah, it didn't age well. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. There is more Scooby-Doo related content on my channel, and let's face it, if you're here, you're likely a Scooby fan. I also cover other subjects, so please check them out as well.